who is the person that they can deliver the most value for, get the most return with the thing that they do. And we just focused on those people, and we just changed the positioning so it talks to those people. And overnight, they are able to 5 or sometimes even 10x what they charge for the work. And they're doing the exact same work, exact same process, but they're just changing who they're doing it for.
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm thrilled today to be joined by, I think, like a new friend. I think I'm going to go ahead and call us friends, Matt. At least you're my friend, and you can decide later if you want to be my friend or not. But we met a few months ago. We got to create some content together on your podcast, and I'm excited today to have you on the podcast. For those that are listening, Matt is the founder, creator of The Creative Life, which is an accelerator for creative professionals, has an operating system for living a creative life. He's also a best-selling author of Create and Prosper. He's been featured on a ton of podcasts and is, a very thought leader when it comes to helping creative professionals design a business and a lifestyle that serves them. And that's what we're going to talk about today is, I think the traps that a lot of skilled individuals fall into when they have more work than they know what to do with, and they're not intentional about how they leverage that to support their lifestyle. So with all of that, Matt, thank you for making the time to join me on the show today.
Thanks for having me, man. And I'll decide by the end of this podcast whether you're a friend or foe, depending on what questions you throw at me.
Yeah, exactly. I'll see if we can work a few hard balls in here, but nice, I think this will be a pretty easy episode. So with all of that said, I've kind of given everyone an idea of what you do, but in your own words, what do you do and who do you serve?
More recently, I've been introducing myself as the coach that award-winning creatives call when they're done with the hustle. So really everything I do is about making business more fun, making it more profitable, and having more of an impact with the work that you do. So that's kind of like at the essence of what I do. And my clients range from ex-Disney executives all the way through to lead designers at Spotify, international DJs. So like over the last decade, I've been really privileged with the kind of people that have sought me out and the kind of people that I've been lucky enough to coach. And so I've got this real kind of, I guess, inside view of how these top level creatives operate and what they need to do to, I guess, go from like the top 10% to the top 1%.
Now, how did you come to do this as a profession? And, I think the story, it has to do with having been one of those top creatives that was doing great, but wasn't really feeling fulfilled. So yeah, walk us through the backstory. How did you get here?
Yeah. So, I kind of cut my teeth in the film and TV industry, actually. So I started off working in TV ads. And then I went to university to study media and communication because I was really interested in that world. I came out of university straight away, started working in big marketing and advertising agencies in London, and then kind of nationally and then internationally. And I got to the point where I kind of felt like I knew how the whole thing worked. And so I did what many people do, which was, I'm going to do this on my own. And it was a very sort of classic journey, really, of starting your own business, thinking that it was super easy because you had this skill set in marketing, and I had like design and web development. I was a bit of a jack of all trades in the kind of creative space. So I thought, this is perfect. I'll start my own business. And, as many people listening to this probably will know, it's never that simple, right? And just because you can do a skill set doesn't mean that you can go and win clients and manage team and all of that kind of stuff. So it took me about 4 or 5 years to like really find my feet. And I decided that travel has always been a very like big part of my life. My mom was a travel agent when I was growing up, so I've been lucky enough to see lots of the corners of the world. And I decided kind of before COVID and before like being a digital nomad was really a thing, I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and I decided that I wanted to live this kind of nomadic lifestyle where I had a fully remote business and I could work from anywhere in the world. So back in 2015, I'd basically achieved this goal. And so I'm sat, I think I was in Canada at the time. I'm sat on the side of this ski slope. It's like a Tuesday afternoon. I've got a snowboard strapped to my feet. And I take my phone out of my pocket and I snap a photo of like the Canadian Rockies in front of me. And I'm about to post it to Instagram, being like, how cool is my life? Tuesday afternoon, snowboarding on the mountainside. Don't you wish you were me kind of thing, right? And I stopped myself because I felt this real incongruence between what I was portraying to the outside world and what was actually happening for me internally. Because although it looked like I had this amazing business that I could run from anywhere in the world, the truth was I was pretty unfulfilled. And I wasn't really happy with the kind of work that I was doing. I wasn't really happy with the kind of clients that I had. And I wasn't making like mega bucks. I wasn't like a multimillionaire or anything. I was getting by. I was paying for my travel, but it was a very kind of self-funded, like self-introspected lifestyle. And so I stopped myself from posting this photo. And literally as I stopped myself and I'm just kind of looking on my phone, this message comes through from my mom and it just says, call me as soon as you can. And like, that's never a good message to get from like your mom or anyone in your family when you're the other side of the world. And so I speak to my mom and it turns out that a close family friend has passed away like very suddenly and unexpectedly. And it was a young guy. And so I come back to the UK and I start having a bit of an existential crisis because it sounds like a really nice first world problem to have. But like, I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, but I'm sure like a lot of people listening would have had these times in their life where it looks like they've got all of the trappings of success, and it might be different for them. It might be like the nice car, the house, the family, whatever it is that they set their goals on. But internally, they just feel unsatisfied or unfulfilled. And so I started really kind of having this existential crisis because I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, I've got all of these things that I said that I wanted, but I still feel really empty and unfulfilled. And I remember there was this like Steve Jobs commencement speech. I think it was at Stanford. And one of the lines in there, he says like, I get up every single day and I look at myself in the mirror and I ask myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And if the answer is no, for too many days in a row, I know something has to change. And so I started thinking about like, what do I really want to do with my life? If I knew I had a year to live, if I knew that I couldn't fail, what would I be doing? And the surprising answer was not what I'm doing right now. Like it wasn't the business that I wanted to be running. And so that was kind of the beginning of figuring out what I actually wanted to do. And we can kind of talk a little bit more about where that journey led me. But that was kind of like the point up until I decided that my business wasn't really giving me what I wanted. Although it looked great from the outside, behind the scenes, it didn't feel good. And I think that's true for a lot of especially a lot of creatives I coach, is on the outside, they've got the portfolio, they've got the awards, they've got the big clients, but they come to me because they feel like there's something else, something that's missing. They feel like there's more of an impact they want to make with their work, or they feel like they just have a job basically and like 20 bosses.
So yeah, I mean, I have friends that are in the creative space that, have described this to me. I've certainly felt like this at points in my life as well. So the interesting question there is, how do you figure out what the incongruence is? And sometimes it's like there are things that are in your life that you don't want, and there are things that are not in your life that you do want. What was that journey like for you in terms of reconciling what was missing and making changes?
There's like the really simple way to do it, which is to really figure out the answer to that question, which is, if I knew I had a year to live, I didn't have to worry about money. No one was like judging me, or I wasn't going to be judged by what I did. What would I do? Like, who would I be spending time with? What kind of work would I be doing? So that's kind of like the first layer. And that will give you an indication of really like where there's like a misalignment between what you're actually doing now and what you want to do. That's like overly simplistic, because then there's this big gap of, okay, how do we get from A to B? But the layer that was the most powerful for me was underneath that. And this was kind of like the pivot to my story, in the sense that because I was so lost, I got some coaching. I got a life coach. And we started going through these questions and these ideas. And one of the things that he said to me was like, why do you want these things? Like, when I answered this question, that what I would do when I had a year to live and money was no object, I just started brainstorming. I would do this, and I would work with these kind of people, and I'd have this kind of impact. He was like, why? What would that give you? What would that give you? And he kind of did that why stack that you might have heard, the 5 whys, really got down to this thing. And what was interesting was that like my answer to every single one of those things was a feeling. It was an emotional state that I wanted. I wanted to feel like I was making an impact. I wanted to feel like I was free to do whatever I wanted to do. I wanted to feel a sense of significance. And I later came to learn that when people talk about values, what they're really talking about is predominant emotions that we want to feel, right? Someone might say like, oh, one of my values is honesty. But like, what does that really mean? What is behind this idea of honesty? Is it that like you want to know that you're being authentic to yourself, or you want to feel like you're being authentic and you're not misleading people? Like, what's actually behind that? And so that was a really useful tool for me, because it allowed me to get this sense of fulfillment without waiting till someday, right? Because if like in the first scenario we have, what are we doing now? What do we really want to be doing? There's quite a big gap. It might be totally different. For some people, it's like, I don't want this business at all. And like for me, it ended up being totally different. It was like, I went from running a marketing and design agency to being a life coach. All right. And so like that transition was massive. And it's not the kind of thing that you just like one day turn off your business and fire all your clients, and the next day you're a life coach. It doesn't just work like that. Right. So by identifying your values, your predominant emotional states that you want to feel, it allows you to start thinking about ways you can get that now. Like, how do I get more impact or a sense of impact in my life? How do I get more freedom? How do I get more significance? And there's like little things that you can do every single day just to have more of those emotions, because that's ultimately what we want, right? We can say we want more money. We can say we want a better relationship with our kids. We say whatever it is. Underneath that is a feeling that we want. We want a feeling of connection. We want a feeling of belonging. We want a feeling of freedom, whatever it is. So then that allows you to bring like the future to now, and actually allow you to start bringing some of that fulfillment into your life.
So this, of course, led you down this path of saying, I want to coach people, I want to help people with this. And interestingly enough, like the journey you went through is part of what you're helping your clients with today. Before we hit record, you described it as like want, feel, and how. So helping people get clear on what they want in the same way that you went through that journey, helping them get clear on how they want to feel. And then, I think where it gets tactical is, okay, now how do we actually start shifting the business, your life, your work in a direction that supports that? So, why don't we dig into that? What are some of the challenges that people come to you with beyond, some of the things that you personally experienced?
Yeah, there's only really like 3 main things I would say. The first one is that once you get to a certain point in the creative space and you are really good at what you do, you have a really good portfolio of clients, you get to a point where you play in this kind of certain league, I suppose I would describe it as everybody else. And there is no real way to differentiate your business from some of your competitors. Like, you're in the top 10%. You are as good. If you put the work side by side, it would look pretty much the same. Like, you're really good at what you do. You have some awards. You have big name clients. Like, on the surface, you're exactly the same. So the first challenge that most people come to me with is, I constantly keep getting compared to my competitors, who often will charge less money or have a slightly different process or something where, even if it's not even about the money, for a lot of people, it's just the feeling of being a commodity. Like, your work is just commoditized. It's like, oh yeah, your studio is great, but then like, so is this studio over here, and you guys kind of churn out the same sort of work. And I think more and more now with things like AI, this is becoming more of a thing. People are like, oh, I spent all these years honing this craft, and now all of a sudden, like, AI can create some stuff that looks pretty close to it, right? It might not be there yet, but it's like, it's pretty close to it. So the first thing is like this idea of differentiation. Like, how do you stand out from your competition? So that's like problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, they have these years and years of industry experience. They have all of these amazing insights. They have all of these amazing things that have happened to them in their life. And in general, they are not very good at communicating it. And that's actually what got me into this business that I'm doing right now. It's like, I thought I wanted to be a life coach, and I trained to be a life coach, and I started coaching people. But the obvious thing for me was to coach creatives because I was surrounded by them. That's the industry that I was in. And what I realized is like one of the key challenges they have is like they're often very talented at what they do, but they really struggle to articulate how that actually helps people so that they can get paid money. And I'd spent the last 10 years learning about communication. Like that is literally what I'd been immersed in from my first gig as a kind of assistant director in making TV commercials through to what I studied at uni, through to my own marketing agency. Like I was just learning how to communicate. That's ultimately what I was doing. And so like the first iteration of my business was, right, I'm not just like a general design and marketing agency now. I'm a marketing consultant for creatives. Like I'm just going to help creatives because they're the ones that struggle the most with this communication. So the second pillar is really about like, how do we communicate the value of what we do and all of this industry experience that we have to the right people so we can charge what we want to charge, but also more importantly, so that we get treated like a partner for our clients, not just this like gun for hire, this creative monkey that's pushing pixels around a screen. Like, how do we actually get treated like somebody who is an expert or a guide or a valued partner? So that's like big problem number two. And then the final one is around delivery. So a lot of people listening to this probably would have nailed one and two. Like they feel pretty differentiated in the market. They don't get compared to other people that much. They're pretty good at communicating what they do and they're always busy, but the founder is stuck in the business and they are just like burnt out. If they stop working, the business stops working. They can't really take holiday. They basically have a job that they've created for themselves. So the third big problem is that there is no kind of like scale or systems or deliverability in terms of what they are providing for their clients. So they don't have a productized service that somebody else can deliver on their behalf. They don't have the right systems in place so that if they step away from the business, then things can keep running. And they're basically like founders stuck in their business. So they're the kind of three core problems. Number one, their ability to differentiate themselves from other people. Number two, their ability to communicate the value so that they can get a consistent flow of high value clients and get paid what they're worth, get treated like a partner. And then number three, their ability to deliver that work in a way that is scalable and not just trading time for money.
Okay, so we have differentiation, communication, delivery. Sounds like in that order as well, which would make a lot of sense. And it's funny, like I've got some close friends, great creatives, still pretty early on the balance of things in their journey to like building a firm. And this is like the exact journey for these guys as well, right? Like the last few years, differentiation has sort of been the first thing that they've started to figure out, and that's going well. And now, the conversation we just had last week while we were hanging out was like the communication piece, right? And I think a lot of creatives that I've observed, they want to believe that the work is just going to speak for itself. It's like, we'll just keep putting our work out there and we'll just keep getting clients. And the problem is the work can't speak for itself. You have to speak for the work, especially because most people don't have the technical ability to like understand the nuance of that work. And so I really encourage them to like, just talk about it. Just flip on a podcast or whatever, get on Instagram Live. I don't care, but like just start talking about the work and how you got there and what you think about it, and start talking about other work that you see in the world, and like just share the way that you think. And I promise you, people will start gravitating towards you because like you guys are super smart dudes. But it's not out there. I can't consume that part. And then I'm sure that the next piece will be delivery. And so like, it's just very relevant. So let's start with point number one, differentiation. This has been a hot topic for a while, but it's still a challenge, I think, for a lot of folks, especially creative professionals that have gotten into business because they develop subject matter expertise, skill in a certain discipline. So how do you think, at a high level about creating differentiation from a point of, just sort of being a generalist or having a discipline that you offer to clients right now?
So I just want to, I guess, preface this by saying if you are really early on in your career and you don't have a ton of experience, then being broad and not being able to differentiate yourself that much is okay. Like, I think people worry too much about niching and like positioning really early on. But I actually think early on, trying lots of different things and figuring out who your skill set is most valuable for, building skills, experimenting, having lots of different like industries that you maybe have experience with, I think that's quite a good thing. So this advice is specifically for people who have, I'd say, 8+ years of industry experience, ideally 8+ years of running their business. But if they've done 15, 20 years of maybe like a bit of contract work and different agencies, and then like they've just launched their business and it's into its 3rd or 4th year, then this still applies. But I kind of learned this idea from one of my mentors, Daniel Priestley, who is a very successful entrepreneur, but has a very like clear framework or thinking of things. And Daniel's got this kind of concept that he talks about where he says we're all standing on a mountain of value, but because we're standing on top of it, we can't necessarily see it. And it's this idea that like everything that's happened to us in our life up until this point has led us here today, but more importantly, puts us in a unique position to help someone. And so the way I kind of think about it is almost like every experience that you've had, every person that you've met, every country that you've traveled to, every project that you worked on is like this unique piece of data. And when you combine all of that data together, the data string is so long that there is literally no other data string like that in the world. And that essentially, the easiest way to think about that is like, that is your story. That is what has gotten you here. So I think the first big idea to kind of unpack for people when they're thinking about differentiation is operate under the assumption that you are in a unique position to solve a problem for a specific type of person. And when you realize that and you work on figuring out who that is, immediately your business becomes 10 times more valuable. So like I've literally got case studies of clients where within the first few weeks of us working together, we've just figured out of all the clients they've ever worked with, who is the person that they can deliver the most value for, get the most return with the thing that they do. And we just focused on those people and we just changed the positioning so it talks to those people. And overnight, they are able to 5 or sometimes even 10x what they charge for the work. And they're doing the exact same work, exact same process, but they're just changing who they're doing it for.
Yep. And so I think this is the nuance here, right? The thing that I think a lot of people get stuck in is hyper analyzing this. So, we have all of these different clients, and then we start getting bogged down in the vertical industries, the horizontal sort of service offering slices across all the different things that we did. We start thinking about market size. Like we start thinking about all of these sort of tangential data points that make up, how you would describe a target. But how do you differentiate between these sort of descriptors and what's actually important, what the first principles are in terms of like finding the right differentiation?
I'm only really ever looking at 4 things. So when I'm thinking about who am I uniquely positioned to help, I'm thinking about, it's the 4 Ps, right? Just to make it easy to remember. So it's person. Who am I uniquely positioned to help? It's what problem do they have? What promise can I make to them? And what is the process of getting them from where they are now to where they want to be? So person, problem, promise, and process. And so when I'm dialing in someone's positioning, they're the 4 things that I want to play with. And the first piece, which you kind of alluded to there, like the person, usually people have got a pretty good idea about who that is, but for some reason they're kind of resisting it. So I'll give you a really tangible example. I worked with a guy called Eric, who used to be a lead designer at Spotify. And when he first came to me, he wanted to build this studio. Like he knew there was something bigger, but he was still kind of like a one-man band with a bunch of freelancers, and he was charging day rates, and he had these massive clients. Like he's worked on projects for like, he's done like the Beats by Dre stuff. He's done like Spotify stuff. He's rebranded Elvis Presley and Whitney Houston for Sony Music. So like he's got some big projects under his belt, right? But he was really, really struggling to go from like solopreneur to studio. And one of the reasons was he just was like trying to do too much stuff. So he would be doing like some music stuff one week, then he'd be doing something for like a wellness brand. And it was just way too convoluted. And I said to him, like, if you had to only just serve one person, the person that you feel uniquely positioned to help, who would it be? And he was like, it would be like music tech brands. I said, okay, cool. Let's double down on that. And he was like really hesitant at first. He was like, I'm going to miss out on all of this work. Like, what about if there's not enough work? All of this stuff that comes into our heads. But I was like, look, just focus on this. Be the guy who's known for working with those brands. Use your experience at Spotify and all of these things. And he just doubled down on it. And like, it didn't happen overnight, but within the period of about 12 to 18 months, he went from a one-man band with some freelancers to a team of 8 people. He was doing about 250K in revenue when I met him. He's now on track to do 1 million. And when I said to him, and I've got this interview on my podcast, I was like, what was the main thing? And he was like, one of the biggest shifts in our business was just niching down and positioning ourselves as the go-to branding studio for music tech brands. And like, that's all we did. And then all of a sudden, everyone else was like, oh, you've got to work with Eric because he's the guy that understands the music and tech world. And he's ex Spotify and he's done Beats by Dre. And like, it just made so much sense to me. It was there staring him in the face, but he was just kind of resisting going all in on it.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our agency profitability toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. And with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. I think what you've touched on here is the fear, the resistance that everybody has to niching down, but particularly creatives, which is this fallacy that overnight, like when I changed my messaging on my website, the way in which I get business, which for most of these people has been 100% relationship based or almost entirely relationship based, is just going to stop. Like everybody that knows me is going to go to my website, see that I've slightly changed my positioning messaging, and then decide I'm never going to refer people to this person ever again, which is like exactly what doesn't happen. This is sort of like you could look at this as like a benefit or you could look at it as a bug, but like people are still going to refer you the wrong fit clients for a long time.
And to give you like a really tangible example of this, like I changed my positioning and said that I was a business coach, got rid of like most references to like web design or anything. 5 or 6 years later, I was still getting messages from people asking me to help them with their website. And I was like, have you not seen, like there's nothing online about me now that says that I'm like a web designer or I have like a marketing agency or anything. And I'm still getting messages from people asking to like help them build a website.
Yeah, because I mean, those people, like in their mind, it's like Matt is the website guy, and they don't even go to your website. They're just talking to their buddy, and their buddy's like, "Oh, I need a website." They're like, "Oh, I know a guy," and then they do the email intro, and like that's it. And that's going to keep happening. So I'm glad that you touched on that. That like it wasn't an overnight change, and I think for a lot of people that are afraid that they're going to have to like cold turkey transition from one thing to another, it's like I wish that was how it worked, but it's not how it worked.
Yeah, and I always say to people like, no one's paying as much attention as you think they are. No one's paying as much attention as you, that's for sure. Like no one notices a lot of the time. Like, yeah, like you said, people have got their own lives, their own businesses. Like they're just not paying attention.
So we've touched on differentiation. You've talked about the 4 Ps here: person, problem, promise, process, which I love. So let's go on to the next piece, which is communication, right? So somebody figures out who their ideal target client is, who they can deliver a ton of value for. And then the next piece, of course, is like communicating that into the world in a way that is effective, that reaches the right person, and that connects with them in a way that drives business. So how do you think about developing that communication?
Yeah, so there's one like big core idea, which I always say to people, which is if you want to get better at communicating the value of what you do, you need to stop talking about what you do. And people are like, what? I'm like, you talk so much about your services. Like we're a branding studio. We're amazing at branding, yada, yada, yada. And all that's really doing is attracting what I call stage 4 buyers. And stage 4 buyers are people that are comparing predominantly on time, price, and quality. And so we're always in the kind of good, fast, cheap trap. When we switch our focus from what we do and what our services are to who we help and what that person's symptoms are. So I always say to people, the easy way to remember it is swap your services for symptoms. Then the way that you communicate the value of what you do totally changes, because you get the attention of people at stage 2 in the decision-making process, which is all about like they're aware they have a problem, but they haven't yet decided that they're going to do something about it. And they might not even be aware of what the options are or what the solution is. So the kind of key mindset shift for creatives to make is stop focusing so much on you and what you do and what you serve or sell, sorry, and focus on the people that you want to serve and how you help them and what's going on in their world, and talk to those pain points and those desires and those day-to-day frustrations and symptoms.
So I think that this is an important idea, and I'll insert like some personal anecdotes here to build on this. So, I like to think that we're pretty specifically positioned at Parakeeto. We're pretty differentiated. And there is this sort of tension where the more you differentiate yourself, the sort of further you get from the beaten path, which is somebody types graphic design services into Google, and like it's a bad example because they're going to get like a million results. But let's say accounting services, whatever the thing might be, you're less and less likely to be able to like tap into that the more radically you differentiate. So the downside of that, of course, is, to your point, like you're less likely to be competitive in the red ocean of like someone is looking for this specific thing. And what that creates is a requirement to catch people earlier in the buyer's journey to start shaping how they think about the problem, right? And so like the problem with us is we've never been able to run Google ads. We've never really been able to do bottom of funnel SEO. We've always had to do middle and top of funnel SEO. We've never really been able to do cold outreach because no one is typing profit management services into Google because it doesn't exist. We invented it. And so like, I think this is such an important piece, right? Is being able to move up the chain, catching people when they're becoming problem aware. So you have an opportunity to articulate this point of view on, here's how you might have thought about this in the past. Here's a different way to think about it, based on our understanding of the world, our deep understanding of this problem. It's critical because when we've tried to just like take this radical differentiation and go back to like the well on stage 4 buyers, if you've described it, it doesn't really work that well. Nor does it create actually the benefit that we're trying to create with this differentiation.
Yeah, 100%. And like, if you want to be treated like a partner who is valued and who is able to charge 5, 10x what your competitors charge, it is the only way to really do that. Like, unless you're the top 0.01% and you're a McCann or, like someone who is just like globally recognized, like if you're going to drop £1 million on branding, you're probably going to go to McCann Erickson or like somebody who, just is the name, like because you want them to do your branding. Unless you are those people, everybody else, that's the shift they need to make, is from trying to basically get people at the stage when they've made the decision that they need a rebrand to getting them way before then and helping them to understand how what you do actually solves their problems and is going to get them more of the things that they want.
Yeah. Now, a couple of things I think are important to talk about here, just in terms of managing expectations. My personal experience has been that making this shift and doing a lot of content and a lot of education at that stage in the buyer's journey, it has both sped my sales cycle up in some ways, but like at a macro level, it has slowed the sales cycle down in the sense that I'm encountering someone in some cases 6 months, in some cases a year, in some, like I've had people literally tell me, I've been listening to you for 5 years. And of course, so at that point, it only takes a 30-minute conversation to like start working together, which is great. But in another sense, it's like it has taken 5 years for this person's unique sales cycle to trickle in. And of course, on the macro, it doesn't matter, right? Because every month there is the person that just found out about me this week and the person that found out about me 5 years and everything in between happening. So when you do this consistently enough, it just ends up not mattering. And the net is much more business than you otherwise would have gotten. But I think that's an important thing to touch on, is it also sort of changes the whole sales motion in terms of like, if you were used to just going to people that were looking to buy right now and competing for them, this is going to be a bit of a different way of going to market. And over a long period of time, though, like in my experience, it's going to end up being actually better and being able to give you a lot of volume still.
I agree with that. I agree that it's definitely a change. I do have a solution for the warming up part. So the way I look at it is that like sales and marketing to me are separate things. And you can, if you want to make a lot of money, you can either get really good at sales or really good at marketing or really good at both. And for me personally, and for most of the creatives that I work with, the lowest hanging fruit is the sale. And so I remember I went through a phase when I was like really doubling down on sales, really doubling down on like the psychology of sales, what is selling. I've spent tens of thousands on like working closely with the top salespeople in the world. And there was a point in my coaching business a few years ago now where people were just signing up to work with me because they were like, you know what you just did with me there? I want you to teach me how to do that. And like, that was it. It was just an hour on the call with me. And they were like, holy shit, like, how do I send you money? And there's a specific process. So you can have like zero marketing and all you need to do is convince someone to jump on a short call with you. And if you know how to sell and you know how to ask the right questions, you can drastically speed up that sales process. So even if someone's not that warm, like they don't really know who you are, haven't really heard of you before, any of that stuff, if you know how to structure a sales conversation and ask the right questions, I'm not saying like every single person you talk to, but 20 to 30% of the people that you speak to will become clients if you run people through a specific process. And like, we probably don't have time to get into the process right now, but if you're listening to this and you Google my name and then the one-page sales framework, I've literally put this whole thing into a framework and you can just follow it like step by step. And there's a YouTube video where I talk you through each one of the processes. And basically what's happening is like in marketing, people gradually go through that buying decision-making cycle slowly as they consume content. In a sales conversation, if you know what questions to ask, you can move them through that entire cycle in between 45 and 90 minutes.
Well, we will leave a link to that in the show notes. So if you want to get access to that one-page sales framework, we'll make sure it's linked up there. With that, to your point, we are getting to time, and I want to make sure we touch on the last piece of your framework here, which is delivery. So assuming we have differentiation, we figured out communication, we have clients now coming to us to solve this specific problem, that's all fine and dandy. The last piece is sort of escaping the trap of being the bottleneck in the business, not being able to get out of delivery as the founder, or not giving yourself the optionality, let's say, of being able to not do that. How do you think about creating that freedom?
Yeah, so this really relies on you to know your ideal client really well. Because the way I think about it in my mind is like, I'm thinking about the ideal client, and then I'm thinking about two things: where they are now and where they want to be. And so when I'm helping people to design the delivery mechanism that's going to be able to take them out of their business, what I'm getting them to do is think about like the ideal client, list all of the kind of challenges and pain points and frustrations that they have, and all of the things that they want in an ideal world. Pick the ones that you feel confident solving, like the challenges you feel confident solving. They usually map onto a promise, like what that person wants. And then all I get them to do is just think about every single step that they would take that client through in order to get them from A to B. So a little bit like two islands. Like here we are now, we're on this island, but it's not great. We've run out of food, or, you know, it's too dry or whatever. And we can see this island over here and it's got like waterfalls and amazing fruit and everything. Like, how do we get there? Because the sea's pretty rough and I think there's sharks in there. And like, what are all the things that we'd have to do to feel confident that we were going to get our client over to that island safely? And that basically becomes your process, right? And then the next stage of that is kind of packaging that process up in a way that is systemized. And obviously this is kind of like a bit more your world, where you can basically deliver that predictably, repeatably, in a way that is more like a product than a service. So it doesn't change every single time. It doesn't change depending on like what clients you work with. It's like, we go through this process with every single client. Our team knows what the process is. Like the client knows what the process is, and we won't skip a stage, because if we skip a stage, then they might not get to the other island.
So to add to this, I think one of the challenges that I've observed, and maybe you've observed the same thing too, is that there's sort of two problems that people tend to run into when it comes to this point in the journey. The first problem is just like people, which is hard, right? If you've never really had to hire people, train them, onboard them, retain them, manage them, etc. That's a whole skill set that needs to be developed, and we're not going to trivialize that. So that's part of it. And underlying that is like actually being able to clearly communicate what the expectations are, what good looks like, how we know it's done, etc. So it's like the process layer, the people layer. And then there's the profit layer. And this one is overlooked and I think so avoidable, which is like they get to this place where they have more work than they know what to do with. And then they realize, like, oh shit, I actually haven't priced this in such a way that I can even afford to pay other people to do the work. So I've just sort of handcuffed myself to these client relationships. And of course, like, hopefully this positioning allows you to like charge more money and maybe you'll happen to have the margins. But that's a piece that I would just encourage people to start thinking about a lot earlier so that it's not another problem that you have to solve when you get to this place, because the other stuff is hard enough already. You know, the process, the people, like that's difficult stuff. So just when you're pricing things, pretend that you're going to have to pay everyone for the amount of time that you spend on stuff, and then price such that you have enough margin to be able to pay those people and still have a profit to run the business and pay yourself. That would be my sort of like all the way back at the start of this. And if you figure out that like it's impossible to charge enough to do that, then you have either a costing problem or you have a market and positioning problem, or maybe both.
And if you want to dive into that more, go check out the interview that I did with Marcel on the Creative Courage podcast, because you went to town on that and like it blew my mind, quite frankly.
Well, it's a perfect handshake. You know, you've sort of led us all to water here in terms of like the differentiation, the communication, and now thinking through process. And then, yeah, sure, we'll leave a link in the show notes if anybody wants to go check that out. With all of that, Matt, I know I've kept you here longer than we agreed to have you here. So for those that do want to learn more about you, consume more of the great content that you publish, where else should we be sending them in the show notes?
Well, there's a tool that I developed recently, which is quite cool. So my second book is coming out, which is based around the 3 pillars that we just talked about. It's called the Creative Studio Roadmap. And the idea is that it's basically a roadmap to those 3 things that we talked about at the beginning, which was, you know, more freedom, more fulfillment, and more financial security. And I don't know about you, but like I love reading books, but sometimes you have to trawl through quite a lot of waffle to actually get to the bits that are like relevant to you. And so I've developed a tool basically that asks you a series of questions, and then like based on those questions, it will recommend where you need to focus the most in your business. It's not always just differentiate, communicate, deliver in that order. It kind of depends on like what you've got in place already. And it'll also give you some like really tangible actions. So again, we'll leave the link in the show notes to that if you want to check that out. But in terms of like connecting with me, the platform I'm on almost every day is LinkedIn. So if you've listened to this, if you've enjoyed it, I'd love to just hear from you, whether it's a comment on one of my posts or whether you send me a direct message. I'm pretty much on there every day.
Amazing. So we will have in the show notes a link to the one-page sales document plan. I forget exactly what you called it.
One-page sales framework.
Yeah, there we go. That framework will be in there. A link to this tool that accompanies your new book, Matt's LinkedIn, and of course, just like Matt's other socials, website, etc., and a link to our interview on your show. And with that, Matt, any final words of advice for our creatives out there, our top 10% creatives that want more out of their life and business?
I think it's just like what we were saying at the beginning, you know, it's like running a business is really fucking hard, right? Like you've picked a hard path. So make sure it's fun. Like make sure it's something you actually want to do. Make sure it actually makes you money. Make sure it brings you fulfillment. Make sure you have the freedom to choose the kind of clients that you want and who you work with. So this big kind of overarching concept that I think I want people to take away from this episode is like, build your business by design. Don't let it just be built by default by the clients that come to you and the things that you just say yes to. Like really sit down and think about like, what is the kind of life that I want? Who do I want to work with? What kind of impact do I want to have in the world? What do I want to be known for? And intentionally build a business around that. Because I think if you do, you'll have so much more fulfillment in your life. Your friends and your family will like you more because you'll be a nicer person to be around. But more importantly, I think you will be able to have a genuine impact with the work that you do. And that's ultimately why I started my business and why I started doing this, is because I wanted to empower people to do work that actually lights up their soul and that actually has a positive impact in the world.
Amazing. With that, Matt, I want to thank you for being on the show today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at Parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.